Okay, you're all set.
So just call it to order, Jim. Yeah.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is our April public board meeting. Eli is taking attendance, and I would like to entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
And Jamie has joined. Hi, Jamie. We just got started. And then, is there any discussion of for the agenda? All right, let's have a vote then.
Okay. Trustee Kleinman.
Yes.
Trustee Leha.
Yes.
Trustee Moore.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Trudeau.
Yes.
Trustee Vanderbroek.
Yes.
Approval agenda.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, our consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of the consent agenda? Woohoo. All right, we'll take a vote.
Okay. Trustee Kleinman.
Yes.
Trustee Leha.
Yes.
Trustee Moore.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Trudeau.
Yes.
Trustee Vanderbroek.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments, Eli?
I have not received any. I'm making sure. Let me check one more place. No, we have received no citizens' comments.
Great. Just as a reminder, anyone who might be watching can make comments on the YouTube channel, right?
Correct. Or they can email ask@aadl.org, or they can make a phone call to 327-4245 and leave a voicemail, and those will be played at the end of the meeting.
Ooh, I love voicemail comments. It's like a hotline. All right, moving on to committee reports. The executive committee met this afternoon at 5:45, which included Karine and me, Dharma away today. We touched on the timeline for the director's evaluation, and as I think all of you are up to speed at this point, and we will vote for a closed session to meet with Josie next month to discuss her evaluation, and so at this point I'm working on kind of our formal memo to Josie. And then we also did just kind of review the draft budget for next fiscal year. We'll have that on the agenda later this evening for discussion. And we did a quick review of our agenda for the evening tonight, or for this meeting tonight. That was all of our business. Any questions or comments?
I'm muted.
All right. Moving on to Budget and Finance Committee. Dharma is away today, and I think, Scott, you're going to give the report for the committee?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
I looked at my notes earlier when I heard Dharma wasn't going to be here. And so the Finance Committee met on April 12th. Trustee Ackman, myself, and Trustee Vanderbroek were in attendance. The bulk of the meeting, we discussed the proposed budget, which is also on tonight's agenda. So I won't go into too much depth, other than the revenue expectations last time we heard were expected to be a little bit up year over year, but essentially steady, which is what we've been expecting so far. Maybe there'll be updates for today. And the biggest item we talked about was the biggest cut compared to last year's approved agenda was in programming, and the rationale behind that. And so we had a good discussion about the reasoning about the budget, and we can I'm sure discuss that more later tonight. One thing that threw all of us before the meeting that we talked about was reading the proposed versus approved variance column, which is the last column. So that column is comparing the column before it and then 2 columns before that. So it took us all a little while to get our heads around what that represented. Other than that, I think I got a clarification on how penal fines work as a revenue source for the library. I was curious about that, and we got background. And the only other item I recall is we were expecting for the next month's meeting, an update on our anonymous donation policy. So we'll learn more about that next month. We didn't really get into it. And I think that was everything. I don't know, Director Parker, if I missed anything.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
We're going to actually circle back around because I realized that I left out item 6 on my tiny little laptop, which are our financial reports from Josie. So,
But no, Scott, you didn't leave anything off. You did. You did a great job. That's all right, Jim. I was going to say I'm going to do the financial reports before the director's report. So
thank you.
that's fine. So if there are no more comments about the financial meeting, so you have in front of you you have the check register. If there are ever any questions about anything on the check register, we're happy to discuss those and as individual items. We're more than happy to do that. And also the financial summary for the 9 months ended in March. The cash, the tax receipts are at 100.8%. So we're going to, which indicates there's more than we anticipated coming in. The fund balance activity, which you can see in the graph, it's higher than it's been in a couple of years. So we'll talk about that more later. So the year-to-date revenue is equal to $13,267,216, and of that, $221,000 is and some more is due from other governmental units for penal fines and state aid. Total cash receipts through March equals $957,529. The as of March 31st, $455,762 has been prepaid for expenses not yet incurred, and this is just how we pay ahead on our different things, payrolls and things like that. Total cash expended through March equals $11,869,888. So the revenue over under expenditures, the actual cash receipts are 100.7% of budget, and the actual cash expended in this budget is 66.57% of the budget. You know, we even though it's more than 50% of the budget and it's April, we are very much aware that we're going to have money at the end of the year. We're going to have money left. And this just indicates that. It shows it. So there's, I have on page 22, the balance sheet of the governmental funds that shows us everything, the general fund, the capital fund, the grants, and all our total governmental funds. There isn't anything surprising in this month to month or that I would call out to you or unusual. Then the statement of revenues and expenditures for the general fund, which is the operating budget, which is the March actual, the year-to-date actual, the budget itself, and this is where you can begin to see where that is going to fall off into money left over, budget remaining, and the percentage the year-to-date. And so you can see where some of those year-to-date percentages are really low. And that's not going to get spent out before the end of the year. It's just not possible. And so we're going to end up with probably close to $2 million left from the budget from this current year. And we'll be talking to the board and the finance committee about approving for that money to be moved in the capital fund, not into the fund balance, but into capital fund for work on all of the buildings. So if there are any questions about the budget, the monthlies, I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
It all
Okay.
makes sense given the kind of limited nature of programming
Right.
with the pandemic. So
Right. That's right.
and it's, you know, it's actually really wonderful to be able to take the surplus and reinvest it in the physical spaces, which we hope will be,
Right.
you know, back up and running again.
Well, you're going to see some slides, I think, of the downtown youth department restroom. I think we have those in here tonight, and you'll see how much that change that is. And people are going to be so glad about that. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad about that. I know other people who take little people into the library are going to be very glad about that. So, all right, if there are ever any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions about the budget finances.
Thanks, Josie.
Mhm.
Should we move right on into your
Director's report.
Director's
So I'll
report?
let Eli bring up the slides for me. And I'll just move through these. Thank you. So we're in the process right now of launching another chapter in our effort Call for Stories initiative. And this one is local Asian American and Pacific Islander history. So we've been doing this with African American for a long time, and we wanted to expand this and into our Asian American Pacific Islander neighbors and their stories and their histories. So we're doing that now. I wanted you to know that the mural on the library lane is going to be going up in the first weeks of May. And the artistic coordinator, Avery Williamson, is putting the final touches on it. And a public dedication event will be planned for later in the summer. The picture on the left is a photo shared by Curtis Wallace, who's one of the 8 artists contributing to the mural, giving you a little bit of a sneak peek into what he's going to be putting up on that library lane fence. So we're really happy about that. Available now. In addition to the New York Times via your library card, you now have instant access to the Wall Street Journal. And we're very happy to be able to provide this to our community. It's the New York Times was very well received, and the Wall Street Journal is taken right off. So I wanted to make a point of this tonight in the director's report. So coming soon, there will be access to more than 50,000 new streaming movies and videos, including content for all ages from HBO, PBS, National Geo, A&E, BBC, the Broadway Digital Archive, CBC, NBC News, CNN, and more. And so that's not yet available, but it's coming soon. And also coming soon from the MCLS Consortium, we have new digital access to thousands of popular magazines through the Libby app. That's another thing that we're talking about happening before the next board meeting. So we want to make sure people knew it was going to happen. So, and this is something that you knew that Detroit Public Television had talked to us about using some of our content on their learning channel. Our story times are now a regular part of Detroit Public Television's Michigan Learning Channel TV lineup, and they, along with programming like 30 Days of Clay. So not only the story times, but also some of the projects, the creative art projects. So we're real happy about that. Our most recent event with the Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor was again featured in the print edition of the New York Times. This time, a presentation by food writer and James Beard Award winner Adrian Miller. And the title of his book is Black Smokes Barbecue. And so second time now in the last probably 3 months or 4 months that AADL has been written up in the New York Times around the culinary historians. So congratulations to them and to the library staff who helped put all this together. It's really a big deal. I'll read this. In the final week of Women's History Month, the U of M School of Information once again featured alumna Josie Parker for a StoryCorps interview that she did with Emily Puckett Rogers in 2018 around U of M's bicentennial. It was a lot of fun. And I was asked for my permission on this, and I deferred to Emily. And I was happy that she agreed to have it aired again in this way. So thank you. That's my director's report.
Thanks, Josie. Questions, comments, reflections? Go for it.
I'm curious what the streaming service is that you've found for video.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So it's called Infobase.
Which-
And that's why we're not mentioning the name, because it's not a terribly memorable or meaningful name.
Yeah.
But we are still looking at how we can best integrate it into our systems. But it is nice because they do have some things that are only available on pay services and streaming services. They have Chernobyl. They have several of the HBO series that we have interest in and that aren't generally available on disc at all. So it enables us to get some new content that people can't get any other way, other than through subscription services.
But it's not a catchy name. So,
Oh, it's cool, but I like to know for.
oh, I know. I knew why you were asking. I knew why you were asking.
It's also amazing. I mean, I think this sort of edition of the Wall Street Journal is really terrific, and also the magazine subscriptions. I was even in a conversation the other day with someone who was like, does everyone here have a subscription to the New York Times? It's so expensive. And I was like, well, actually.
That reminds me to tell you all, we've had people in the community ask us why we can't do the same for the subscriber only information that's available on MLive. And we can find no provided way for a public library to do that through MLive. So I think it's important for me to say it publicly. We would if we could, affordably, but we don't see that possibility. So,
have you looked into the Free Press as well, like Detroit Free Press?
I don't think so. But what we'd heard from is the local community about MLive.
Okay.
So,
I know the Free Press and the Detroit News have been difficult content for the U of M library to provide access to over the years. So it's unsurprising that it would not be possible, or, not that it's not possible, but that it would not be simple.
It's not simple.
The MLive thing, though, I think I'm really glad you're mentioning it publicly, because that's like our, that's our local news information source. For that company to not be willing to work for libraries, people should know that. It's too bad.
Any other comments for Josie?
I'm excited to see the unveiling of the artwork. Really looking forward.
Me too.
Yeah. So not this week, but perhaps next, but we'll make sure when all of you know when it's going up, because I for one want to be standing there watching. I'm very excited about it. But so we'll make sure when it's going up.
Someone just dropped
wasn't mentioned in the director's report this time, but I just have to tell you that so many people have been telling me how much they love shelf service.
Good.
It's been really fun. People are like, it's amazing. And
Good.
I've just been hearing it everywhere. So just good work with that. And I've enjoyed it too. So
we'll continue with shelf service. Shelf service is one of those things where it can go, and we'll continue with shelf service. So after we open back up, whenever that is, but yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josie. We have Sherlanya Turner joining us from the staff to talk this evening on the Black Lives Matter discussion series, which is, as I understand it, ongoing at the library. Sherlanya, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you for having me tonight. What I'm going to do right now is just get my slide deck up so that I will stay on track tonight. So just a moment, please.
Okay.
Get this adjusted. You'd think that after leading so many of these sessions, it'd be easy to get these adjusted, but alas, it looks a little long. So I just want to talk about, I want to start with where we started and take us through where we are right now with respect to this series. And so where were we then, right? So I think it's super important for us to travel back in time almost stretching it to say almost a year now, but we started this series back in late June, early July, and we were just opening the library again for returns, if you can remember that, right? We were like, please hold on to your books. And we were just beginning to be able to open up the vestibules. And so that's super important because some of the services that we offer right now that make it very easy for people to get material weren't quite up yet. And that's very important for the context here. And so what I thought that I'd do is share with you some of the way that we talked about this project with staff. So, we let staff know that the library decided to respond to current events sparked by the murder of George Floyd by police, in part with this series. Here's where I just want to stop and say, like, the library typically does not make statements about current events, but what we do is respond to what's happening in the community. And one of the things that was happening in the community was a lot of people thinking and processing about what these events meant. And so we responded through the series. This is also a part of the initial message that went out to staff explaining what we were doing, basically saying that the incident was a catalyst to the national conversation about anti-Black racism, as we all know, and that the intention of the series is to allow community members to engage. I wish I would have said with, but I didn't. And so I didn't change it here, with material that inform their thinking and learning about anti-Black racism. And so that's what we set out to do when we set up this discussion series. So I thought that I'd talk a little bit about the titles. So this is why I said it was super important for us to remember where we came from, because back then, we weren't able to just deliver up holds for people. We had quite a sizable hold list that we worked very hard to get through. And so when we were developing this list, one of the factors that we looked at is like, all right, we know that we have a very enthusiastic reading community. So let's look and see what we think that they may have purchased in this moment, right? And so some of the titles on this list came from what are the bestsellers and things like that. We knew that the 1619 Project, both in the podcast and the supplement to the New York Times, was freely available to anyone who had internet access. When we looked at selecting movies, we tried to find things that people would be able to view online if they could. And then in terms of the books, some of them, in addition to the ones that we identified as bestsellers during that time, some of them are older titles that are just available due to the public domain. And others of them, for example, the book about Henrietta Lacks is a book that was very popular in this community several years ago. Jesmyn Ward is an author that has a local connection, and she earned her MFA at U of M. So we chose that knowing that some people had some interest in that author, and we tried to be really mindful of that. Some other things that I would like to point out about the titles themselves is that the format varied. We understand that not everybody is going to dig into a hardcore nonfiction book, and that's why we had albums and movies. We knew that not everyone wanted to read just a narrative. So some of those books are essays. And one thing we also thought was important was to think about different angles that one can look at anti-Black racism through. It was super important to make sure that some LGBT authors were represented on this list, and not just one. Sometimes people put together lists like this and they're like, let's just throw in one. And that's not what we did. We made sure that there was a decent amount of representation inside of that list. Sometimes it's a topic of the book, sometimes it's not, because that's how life is, right? Sometimes it's a topic, sometimes it's not. And so we were thinking about that. So that's enough about the titles. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the thinking that went into it. So there were 34 titles. I'm including the albums and the non-book pieces when I say titles. Somebody might be doing the math from the sheet to this, but there are two books that we added to the list. One of them was The Hate You Give, because it became widely available for free while we were doing this. So we're like, it's a relevant book, it's available for free, we're just going to go ahead and add it to the list. And one of them was the Washtenaw Reads book, All American Boys. That was, as you guys know, selected through a separate process, but it was relevant. So when we listed it as an event, we both listed it as the read book, and we listed it as one of the Black Lives Matter discussion books. So who's been coming to these sessions? We don't know who, but we do know a little bit about our numbers, and they've been all over the place. Some of these discussions had one person at them. Literally, it was just me talking to a member of the public for this book. And some of them had larger attendance when we discussed white fragility, which was super popular. When we travel back in time, we had nearly 200 people for that one. The average is it goes up and down, but it's, you know, usually like if we have 10 people, I'm like, wow, that was a big group. But sometimes we have 2 or 3. And sometimes our staff members have come to these public discussions as well, just to give you a flavor of what's going on. But one thing that we learned from these public discussions, especially the ones that had the larger audiences, is that there were a number of participants who came because they wanted to listen to the discussion, but they were not into having a discussion after everything else that they did in their day. And so as one does with library programming, you listen to what patrons are telling you through their actions. And so what we did was started to record our staff discussions. And so this is where I take a little departure to say every one of the public discussions had a staff discussion counterpart. And many of them have been recorded. After we realized that a lot of people wanted to just listen to them, we decided that we were going to make that possible through the staff discussions. And then that way, no one had to show up and just feel like they're awkwardly standing on the virtual wall. So I took a look at the YouTube stats for this, and we had about 600 views. This isn't telling us much more than somebody clicked on these 600 times. We don't know how long people stayed, but I figured since we had access to that information that I would throw it in here. I was like, well, how do we compare this to something else? You know, our well-attended events will outshoot this easily. But I did take a look at all of the videos, the stats for them. The lowest number of clicks was 22. The highest was 90. And most of it is just in between there somewhere. And that's respectable for a book discussion, particularly when it's about a difficult topic. So I'm returning now to the initial email that was sent to staff about these discussions. I feel one of the most powerful wings of this project has been the staff component. Staff members were, well, why don't we just go back here? I included this slide for a reason. We let staff know that we are also committed to supporting their learning about anti-Black racism. And with that in mind, we said to staff, if you're going to be reading these materials or engaging with these materials, you may do that as a part of your work from home hours. This was one way for the library to put its money where its mouth is, right? We always have organizations sometimes that talk about doing things, and that's where it stops, but we wanted to make sure that that's not what we were doing. And then at the end of that email was, if you needed help getting your hands on the titles, let us know and we'll help. What we did was if somebody purchased a copy of any one of these books, we reimbursed them for it. Again, we were dealing with those very long holds queues, and we wanted to support people getting their hands on this material as soon as they can. And I can tell you that several staff members have taken advantage of this as we've seen the recs come through. So this is my, I don't know if this is a common saying or not. This is a saying I heard a lot. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And this is also talking about the way that we handled this with staff. Again, as a part of that initial messaging, we also asked staff to be sensitive to Black employees throughout this time, understanding that often when these tragic national events occur, Black staff members go into the office wondering who is going to ask them about this thing that they're attempting to process. And so what we did was we asked staff to be mindful of that and to basically refrain from engaging colleagues on this topic if that's not already something that you talk with your colleagues about. And so that was also a part, I think, an important part of that initial email. And so we've sort of talked about where we have been and how we approach this. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk about next steps. One thing that we've learned is that it is pretty tricky for people to come to a public place and engage with hardcore nonfiction that is covering topics that may be unfamiliar, may be uncomfortable. And so as the next leg of this series, the intention is to focus on fiction. Fiction will often cover the same sorts of dynamics that you will cover in nonfiction. And it may be a little bit of an easier entry point for our patrons. The plan is to move through time, identifying fiction from the different decades between the 1860s and now, and to continue to build upon what we've learned in doing this series to develop future programming. One thing that this has done, this commitment over a series of time, it allows us to stand on the work that we have done when we are reaching out to community partners and we are reaching out to other groups, as opposed to saying like, we want to do this thing, and then people feeling a little bit like, but can you and will you? And I should have like let my sentence go down, because that really was the conclusion. So I guess at this point, if anyone has any comments or questions, I'm here for it.
Thank you, Sherlonia.
First, I'd just like to say thanks so much. It's just really helpful to see the past, present, future of it, and just really appreciate this work. And just one thought that I had with the summer games coming up, is there going to be any kind of interaction between this sort of public engagement and the public engagement of the summer games with, kids and teens at all?
Every event that we do will of course be included as a part of the game with a code, and the second leg will be picking up in June. That's intentional, right? Because we know that we have more eyes on what it is that we're doing during that point. And talking about, I know that some of the people who are working on more of the game part of things have been thinking about, what are the things that you do in order to include history of the area and facts that are related to these topics, right?
I love
Right
else.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Of how you were able to put protections in for other employees of color, and I think that's the most detailed presentation I've seen on how to do this. You know what I mean? Like, here are specific things that we did in the workplace to make this work well, and I really appreciate that. And I'm gonna share it with other employers who want to do these things, but they don't do it well, or they make you do it in your own time, or they don't set boundaries for people that are helpful. So I like that.
Thank you.
Agreed about that. I was curious if you've what sort of anecdotal feedback you have from staff about the impact of, now that it's been 9 months or almost a year. What are the staff saying about what feels different now versus at the start?
So there have been a select number of staff members who have been at a lot of these, and so it's been very interesting to continue to have sustained conversations with like this core group. And one of the takeaways has been for some of these folks, this knowledge from the nonfiction books has really been stacking up on each other, and I've definitely heard from some of those folks that the way that they're thinking about things is just different after you just go from fact-based book to fact-based book to fact-based book. I have heard from somebody that they were very glad that we allowed people to do this on work time, because that staff member was saying that otherwise that person wouldn't have had the time carved out to go through as much of this material as this person did go through. And so that's been interesting. There have been a number of people who have felt like it was felt like they had a map, I guess, and those are my words, not theirs, but they thought that it was helpful to have a list to go down as they tried to just figure out how to learn more. So those are a few things that I've heard from staff.
I'm really excited. Oh, bad timing. 1 minute, maybe. I'm really excited to see the move towards fiction as a like really serious fiction head, and I'm curious about whether you've thought about poetry at all, because on the one hand, I know that I realize that like poetry is probably not as widely appealing to people as fiction, but on the other hand, poems are short, and it's a way to be able to like jump in quickly without having like you sort of feel like you can read a handful of poems and not feel like you can't do it if you haven't read this whole book.
Sure, that's a really good point. One of the things that I'm thinking about a little bit as I look at organizing a second wing is like, how do you bite off a piece that you can point people's eyes to if they don't have time to do the whole thing, right? And I do think that poetry is an interesting idea as well. And some of the things that are on lists that I've sort of been looking at to try to come up with the next titles. I have seen poetry popping up. So maybe a prose poem might be a good fit because it's like a foot in both worlds, but feels a little approachable. But yeah, that's an excellent point you make there.
Thanks.
It's just really extraordinary to see the scope of the work kind of all in one place. And I also, I'm a firm believer that like a lot of the kind of work that we do as programmers also has like these sort of ripple effects, right? So it's not just like even the 200 people who are in the room, that there's just like a kind of effect that goes beyond. And I think the visibility of the work and just the sort of ability of you and the staff to put together resources quickly, responsively, that lots of people could have access to. I mean, it's just really special, important work. And we just have a lot of gratitude for that work, and for the way that it hopefully helps the community grow and process what's been going on, what's happening.
Thank you.
I don't have too much to add other than to say thank you for all of your work on this. And it's always just amazing to see in the work of the library how well you all listen to the community, figure out how to make use of what you're hearing from people, how you're seeing people interact, and what you're creating to kind of continue to improve and iterate to make things even better as we go. So yeah, and also as a new trustee, it was very helpful to get some of the context and the background of this work, since I wasn't here when it began. So it's nice to jump in and get situated and see where things are going next. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shalanya. Any other comments, reflections? All right. We appreciate your visiting our meeting.
Thank
as a special
you.
guest. Come anytime. I know that you're often here. Anyway.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shalanya.
All right. Shifting us over into new business, moving us into the budget discussion for next fiscal year 21-22. Josie.
Thank you. So what you have in front of you is the draft budget that was brought to the Finance Committee. And in that, since that time, the county equalization department did put out their numbers. When it came out on Thursday, we weren't able to do the fine tuning on this and turn it around to send it back out to you the next day. So we delayed it. So what you're looking at is the draft budget that was sent to the Finance Committee. Actually, what we did learn from the county is that what the budget in front of you shows a 1.5% expected increase in the tax revenue. It doesn't show you a millage increase decrease because we weren't sure how much that would be, but it's just predicated on a 1.5% increase in revenue. In fact, we expect the budget in May to show a 3% increase in revenue. So we're not that far off. And where you see in this budget where we adjusted was in the programming line. So we took the money from programming to make this balance. And we do have 4 positions in this budget that are new. All other positions stay in the library system. There are no eliminations of any jobs or any position that are unfilled, nothing like that. Everything will be filled and continue forward. There is a 3% merit pool in this budget. For those of you new to the library board, our full-time benefited staff are evaluated on a merit system. It's a formulaic system, and the merit pool is voted on by the board within the at the beginning of the year at the budget. The 3% merit pool is not saying people each get 3%. It's just 3% of the personnel budget is the merit pool, is how that pulls out. And then the formula determines how each individual person, what kind of change is in their compensation based on that. So you are in control of what percentage of a merit pool you want in the budget. We're recommending 3. It was also 3 last year, and it has been 3% most years. During the terrible the crisis of 2008, 9, and 10, there was no increase. All the jobs, everything was static through those 3 years. So it does change depending upon conditions and board decisions. So we're recommending 3% in this as well. If the projections that the county sent out are actual, then what we'll do is add a 5th position that was recommended by the managers that I held back on because I was needing to balance this budget. But so that would be, I would put that back in. I would bring the programming budget back up. And if there were additional monies, I would place them in the IT purchasing equipment and in Lynn's department and for maintenance and that sort of thing. Because those tend to be places where things come up. And sometimes it's bigger dollar items than others. And so I would spread it there. But I just wanted to make sure I state publicly, there are no budget cuts in this budget that we expect to be permanent, because we expect to have our actual numbers next month. And so we'll be able to put programming money back in. We hope to be able to spend that money this year. So what you'll also notice is the budget that we're presenting to you and the one that'll come in May won't be that much different from this, are not that far off from the current budget. So there's not a lot of increase in the library operational spending within this projected budget. What you will notice in this year, we'll have that net surplus. And so we will be asking you in June to be able to move that money to the capital fund. But the year before, that was a very small number. And so we were getting fine-tuned, and then COVID hit. And I don't know what it would have been at the end of this year, outside of COVID. I can't know, but I do know why it's as high as it is. So there's a very easy explanation for why it's as high as it is. So those are the highlights of this and the explanation around what it is, and then what we'll be bringing to the Finance Committee in a meeting in May, and then bringing to you at the budget hearing and the budget vote in May also. So Scott and Jamie, if there's more you'd like to say, please do, or if there are questions about this, please ask. I can also tell you that the millage levy will drop a small amount. So the amount you can levy, the millage will go down. Headley will push it down, but the revenue it will bring in actually is an increase. So that's a measure of how property values are high in our community. That's why.
Any additional remarks, board members, questions, comments? This is our kind of first look together, and of course we'll have formal hearing for the budget again at our future meeting. So this is a good time to just take a closer look and ask questions as they arise. Yeah, Molly, go ahead.
This is maybe a level of detail that the board doesn't usually get into, but I'm curious about if we'll hear about the 4 new positions in terms of what
Mhm.
those are going to do.
Yeah, with what will happen, what normally was happening when I bring you a budget that's a final budget is we have a budget narrative that explains in detail what every line, what all of this does. There are, it's a variety of positions. There are some positions in acquisitions department. There are positions in the archives. There are some positions in production and in IT. I don't think there are new positions in, I think those are the places where we have new positions. So. Yeah. It's overall very positive
Yeah.
that it's turned out the way it has with the economy, because we weren't sure last year what all we'd be looking at. So it's very positive.
Yeah, it's a very different scenario than we had initially imagined.
Right.
Yeah, I remember thinking last year, oh, we're so lucky that we know our budget and it, you know, the way that we do, because we can sort of like protect the staff this year. We don't know what's going to happen next year. So it's a great relief to be in like a similar position this year instead of, you know, some of the things that we feared.
Right. That's how I feel too, James. Yes. Yeah.
All right, folks. Anything else? Keep moving along here. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you very much. Finance Committee.
Thank you, Finance Committee. Moving on to the space use agreement for the Friends. This is again a kind of first look, and then we will vote on this late, not tonight, but in May. If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yes. You received the space use agreement in your ephemera. This is an annual agreement that we have with the Friends of the Library for their use of space within our buildings. It's unchanged from last year, so there are no alterations in it whatsoever. It delineates the space that's available to them for their work in the basement, and also it talks about the space on the first floor downtown. But there are also shelves for sales shelves in all of the buildings. If you read it in the agreement and the first section, the designation and use of premises, while we do talk about some spaces delineated, we also have the library has the right with due notice to change where the sales spaces are in all our buildings. So if conditions change for whatever reason in any of our buildings and we need to move that space or reduce that space, or, you know, depending upon whatever might happen, eliminate it for a period of time, this agreement allows you that flexibility. We are able to do that. So our board president and the Friends board president sign this agreement. I do not, but it lays out that we're not involved in the business decisions of the Friends. We're not involved in their management of their shops and how they operate. We do not get involved in that. But within the context of their being within the space in the buildings, then there are boundaries around what can occur here, when, by whom, that sort of thing. This has been a really tough year for the Friends, obviously, because they haven't been able to have in-person sales. And so their financial situation reflects that. There have been no more gifts to the library this year, and there probably won't be for, well, we are not budgeting for gifts from the Friends to the library this coming year, consequently, because I'm not sure when we'll be able to have people come in and purchase material. But what happens is this comes to you to look at in April. They know you're looking at it. They also have it. And if there are questions or concerns, they would be bringing them. And then you vote on it in May. And then our president signs it, their president signs it, and we're good for 12 more months. This also has documentation in it about how their audits operate. So they have full audit every third year. they have, I'm sorry, I'm going to lose the word, and I didn't look before the meeting. There's audits that are not as comprehensive, that they have 2 years, and then the third year is a complete full audit. So, because they have obligations to the IRS that we as having them using the buildings, we must make sure are met. And so we have our responsibility too. So that's why that's in there.
And they're in compliance at the moment.
They are in compliance. Yes. Pat
Thank you.
McDonald is president. She's amazing at that. She does a great job. She's totally keeps up with the financial side of what they should be doing.
What questions do people have, maybe especially for folks who are new-ish to this agreement?
I mean, the biggest question I have is how if there's any impact of the current, pandemic influence on what they're interested in agreeing to.
I think that they would be, they're not going to, I don't believe the Friends will have a problem with the space use agreement as it's presented to them, because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change their possibilities. I mean, they're really hoping to be able to get volunteers back in and to get back open. And that's their hope, is to be able to continue doing what they do. If things go for a longer than we expect period of time, then I'm not sure what, they are doing online sales, and that has helped them some. So they have been doing that. And the books have been available out in our vestibule downtown for people to pick up. They've been paid for by credit card, and that's working. That's how they've been doing that. So they've done some, but it's nothing like having people coming in and coming out. But they have some cash. Their numbers are public. They have $40,000 something, and that's all they have right now, which is a very small amount of money. And they're trying to make sure they continue to grow that. They've trimmed their expenses to the max, and they've done a pretty good job of managing that. But I'm not sure. I mean, they would be very unhappy if we thought they didn't want the space. So.
Someone else raised their hand. I thought I saw somebody. Anyone? Yeah, Scott.
I guess I don't have any questions. We've gotten enough. We've had some background conversations in the Budget and Finance Committee as well. So I think most of my questions have been answered. So it seems like making sure they have the space to get up and running again as soon as it's safe and possible for them to do so. If that they're committed to doing it, then it seems to make sense to keep working with them going forward and hope that things turn around.
Right.
All right. So we'll vote on that next month. And if there are other questions, please let Josie or me know.
Right.
And I think that takes us to our votes for closed sessions. So I would like to entertain a motion for a closed session at the end of tonight's board meeting for the discussion of real estate.
So moved.
Thank you, Corrine.
Seconded.
Thank you, Molly. Any discussion? Then we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay, Trustee Kleinman,
Yes.
Trustee Leha,
Yes.
Trustee Moore,
Yes.
Trustee Solomon,
Yes.
Trustee Trudeau,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderbrook.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And then I would like to entertain a motion for a closed session at the May 24th, 2021 regular board meeting, both for the director's evaluation and discussion of real estate.
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you, Molly. Any discussion? I do think we will have this session actually in advance of, or actually the way that we do the closed session, right, is that we'll convene the public meeting at 6 o'clock, right? And then move into closed session and then back into public at 7. Is that right, Josie?
That's right.
Okay,
Okay.
great. All right, any other discussion? Eli, or sorry, Molly?
Okay.
I was just clarifying, we start at 6 o'clock in the May
In
meeting.
May meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So we basically start an hour earlier next month in order to do the closed session. Eli.
Okay. Trustee Kleinman,
Yes.
Trustee Leha,
Yes.
Trustee Moore,
Yes.
Trustee Solomon,
Yes.
Trustee Trudeau,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderbrook.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, Eli, have we any citizens' comments?
Let me double check here. We've received none on YouTube. We've received none via email or voicemail. However, we did forget to show the images of the youth bathroom during the
Yes,
director's
we
report.
did. I was
You
going
want to see those now before we
Yes,
wrap up?
please.
Yes,
Yeah.
Let me bring that back up.
Because I said we would, and I was like, okay.
Ha!
Yeah.
I figured there was a glitch, and I wasn't going to call it out. So
Okay, here we go. All right. So this is demo day.
Wow.
You're looking at that white wall there is where the map used to be. So this is looking at the after from the demolition day.
the map
And then
that
here-
did not have Ann Arbor on it, I should
Yes.
say. My children found that when we moved here in 1993. Where's Ann Arbor? Oh,
And then here's a framing out, and you can see some of the rough plumbing going in. Here's looking through the doors to enter. You can see the new entrance to the bathroom on the left. This is during the framing, and that little half wall is where the water fountains are, right around the corner there. So here's another view of that. You can see the nook where the water fountains will go and the buffered entrance to the two bathrooms. And here's what it looks like on the inside. We got the tile is in. The partitions just went in last week. You can see we're still waiting for the sink, but you can see the little kid size sink and the adult size sink. And those are the images that we have for you.
Wow. The spectacular.
That's very exciting.
It's really a transformation.
Can't wait.
Something to look forward to when we're open again, for real.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's the end of the public meeting. We are going to recess to closed session for our discussion of real estate.
Okay. So if the board will stay in this Zoom with the meeting, if we're ready to adjourn, we will end the stream and continue the discussion. Okay, here we go.